uh, earn money in their practice. It left them a little short when it came to commercializing their ideas for new inventions and their ventures. So I started an organization, a non-for-profit organization called the Society of Physician Entrepreneurs. It is open to anyone in the healthcare and life science ecosystem who has something to bring to patients. So it's not limited to physicians. And as a matter of fact, most of our members are not physicians. They are healthcare providers. They are software engineers and hardware engineers and chemical engineers and PhDs. And we realize it takes a big tent and lots of people to bring something to the finish line. So the website is www.soapnet.org. We encourage you to look at it and join it because it is a place where you can meet other people that are like-minded and go through the same vicissitudes that you do in terms of the ups and downs of bringing a new idea to market. And with that, today we're going to talk about valuable tips from CEOs of successful life science and healthcare startups. And we have a fantastic panel. I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves to the audience and give them just a quick background of who you are and what got you here. Ahmed, I'll start with you.
Perfect. Can everybody hear me?
Good.
Awesome. Perfect. My name is Ahmed Zobi. I'm the CEO of Center Health Technologies. We are combining medical robotics into med devices to streamline clinician workflow, primarily in the plastic and reconstructive surgery space, currently targeting breast cancer reconstruction, adding a new option for patients undergoing breast augmentation reconstruction post mastectomy. And I started this company about 10 years ago with a couple of my co-founders who were both students at UCI, and excited to be here.
Thank you, Ahmed. Douglas.
Yes, appreciate the invitation to be here today. I'm a venture investor with a firm called Flathead Forge. We primarily invest in water and environmental focused applications and technologies. This very much touches our ecosystem, and this, of course, is where it touches the healthcare system. But serial entrepreneur, founded quite a few companies over the years, which has given me this perspective on where you place these bets and the kinds of things that have a meaningful impact on the mortality of businesses, and how we can amplify the outcomes from the improved playbooks that we've learned through hard lessons. So thank you.
Thank you, Douglas. Patrick, you're up.
All right. My name is Patrick Marcus. My background is primarily in engineering, although I spend most of my time doing business-related stuff these days. So I have a degree in electrical engineering, a PhD in biomedical engineering, and I've been through multiple entrepreneurship programs out of the Eller School of Management at U of A, and also the business school out of Babson College. And I have built multiple technology companies in the semiconductor and solar industry, and currently have a couple of ventures in engineering consulting, mostly in medical devices, military and aerospace, and also medical device security. On the side, I do a lot of coaching and mentoring of startups, do some angel investing, and also help with judging of business plans for the Arizona Innovation Challenge program, which provides a few $1 million of non-dilutive seed funding to Arizona companies.
Great. Thank you, Patrick. Fletcher.
Good morning from Tucson. I am an accidental venture capitalist. I like to say for most of my career, I was an operator in healthcare systems. Some companies you probably heard of, like Columbia, HCA, Century Healthcare, others. At the ripe old age of 45, I started my own company, Providence, took it public. It became a multi-billion-dollar business. I thought I was retiring, Jeffrey, a few years ago, but was invited by the University of Arizona to help them commercialize their technologies. About half of our portfolio is med tech. It's new for the University of Arizona. It's new in Tucson. Historically, our faculty could not benefit from their IP. They now own the majority of these spin-out companies, and we've had the pleasure of spinning out a dozen of them, two exits, and knocking on wood. So I learned how to be a venture capitalist from the very mean, terrible venture capitalists that worked with me over the years. So I think we have a unique perspective about how to start up a company.
That's great. Ray, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ray Liu. I'm the CEO, co-founder of Vena Vitals. So at Vena Vitals, we make a small wearable device that monitors blood pressure continuously. We are clinical stage, getting ready for our FDA submission. So I wouldn't say that we are successful yet by any means. Very much in the trenches right now, working through it. But we have had some reasonable success raising our seed round. We have $8 million from our seed, and then we'll be after FDA clearance, we'll be going after our Series A. I'm happy to share details about that. Otherwise, my background is a mix of medical devices as well as digital health. 2 prior exits as head of product for companies that sold to Cigna and Vizient. So yeah, really excited to be here. Thank you.
Well, as you can see, we have a great panel with a ton of experience and the perspective of both of being the entrepreneur and the funder. So we're anxious to hear what valuable tips they can give our audience. And please, if you have questions, we'll have a Q&A at the end. So let's start by saying, in the beginning, you've all had the aha moment that says, aha, I know something, and I think I can make something that will help people. How do you change that idea into a viable business when you're first starting out? Ray, let's start with you.
Yeah, yeah, it's a really good question. I think it really starts with trying to understand your customers to be able to know, okay, what is the value proposition that you have? And startups start from all different sources, right? There are some where there's a technology or there's an idea, and you try to take that technology and you try to find a potential market for it. There's also ones where, hey, you come across a problem, and it's because of that problem, then you try to develop a technology and you try to, and typically that second approach is a little bit more straightforward, easier, just because you already have a problem that you're trying to solve. It's always hard when you have a technology and you're looking for a problem to solve. But regardless, it starts with understanding who is the customer that you're trying to serve, and talking to those customers, getting feedback, so that then you can really start to develop the foundation of building out a product market fit.
And in that beginning portion of your businesses, there's always some critical decisions that you have to make. What were the critical decisions that stand out in your mind that really allowed you to have success in the companies that you have founded? Ahmed.
I think for me, it's not only finding that the technology works. It's finding, like Ray mentioned, that the customer's needs are there. They want this type of solution. This isn't just, trying to build something for a problem that doesn't exist. But for us, it was really truly seeing the fact that this can make an impact on patient lives, and that's what allowed us to shift it to, okay, now we got to plan it out. Now we got to actually work for the success of this project, versus going. So we started out of university, so versus just going and getting jobs, we were like, okay, well, how are we going to do this? Part of it was planning, federal funding and stuff. So I think execution and planning is very critical to the success of any product and any one project that you're working on. And if you don't do good planning, then the execution is going to lack. And I think that's what a lot of people kind of miss, is that they think product, but they don't look into the plan of where does that product life cycle have to go. You can get away with a bare minimum prototype nowadays into the market, get some user feedback and make some modifications. But some people are always chasing the dragon of perfection, and I think that's what ultimately makes them fail as a company. So I think planning and execution is really critical.
So give me an example of an early stage critical decision that you made incorrectly.
I
Anyone?
think for oh,
Oh, go
I was
ahead. Go
gonna
ahead. Go ahead,
yeah, yeah.
Alan.
I think for us it was because again we're straight out of undergrad, so we don't know how to start a company. We don't know
Yeah.
the basics. We followed a lot of like what was out there, like, oh, you got to do an animal study and then you got to go with human clinical trials. But later on we found out like we could skip all of that as long as we prove that our device is safe, efficacious, and doesn't harm anybody. Biocompatibility testing, et cetera, is done. We could have gotten FDA clearance 5 years earlier, so there's a lot of things that companies need to go do their own research on versus just being told, hey, you got to do an animal, it's a medical device, or it's a drug, whatever. I mean, drugs are different, but like in medical technologies, there are predicates that never had to do a single human clinical trial. So take a look, actually do a deep dive in your technology space and find out what that end goal is. Everybody knows that a medical device has to go through the FDA. Find other products similar to you, see what they did, and just follow exactly that trail versus the standard animal then human, or small animal then large animal then human. And I think that's where we learned our mistake.
So you bring up a good point of having external consultants and when to believe them and when to question or verify what they're telling you. Any other panelists have any thoughts about it or pearls they can offer?
Well, I'll pitch in on this one. I've used advisors from a variety of different backgrounds, a variety of different industries, and most of them were more successful than I was at the time, and so I looked up to them. And I found after using a lot of advisors is some will focus on what you need to achieve your goals, and others will try to adapt you to get you to adapt to achieving the goals that they think would be best based upon their value system. And what I learned was you should always listen, you should always appreciate, you should always seek that advice, but you have to bring that into your portfolio of knowledge and make your own decisions. Don't make their decisions, make your decisions, but make sure that you're listening and using their knowledge. Otherwise, you stop learning, and your learning is always the hard way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
and just to quickly add to that, I think yeah, you definitely do end up needing to use external consultants because it's just impossible as a startup to be able to know everything and have expertise in every single field out there, especially launching a medical device out to market. So especially on the regulatory side, there's quality management, there's all sorts of things that really it could be on the engineering side as well. But I think the approach that you take when you take on consulting is that you still need to drive it. As much as you put in is what defines the success of it, as opposed to just throwing it over the fence for the consultants to be able to do. And I would also say that in terms of just vetting consultants, one of the things that has worked for us very well in the past is providing equity incentives for so we would typically, like actually most every one of our consulting engagements, whether it's engineering or regulatory or legal, we do a portion of our payment in equity, and it helps to ensure that the incentives are very well aligned. Not all firms will do that, but we have found that that's helped us quite a bit.
Interesting. No, that is not a usual way of dealing with consultants. Usually they only want cash.
Yes, that's correct.
That's a good way to have them have some skin in the game. So this is a very regulated industry that we're in. I mean, had I known because I started in medical devices and then went to biopharmaceuticals, had I known how regulated it was, I would have probably said, "What, are you crazy?" And physicians and the public have no clue how regulated our industry is. How do you get that across to them when you're first starting to have your pitch deck and your first foray for funding? And how does that drive all of your decisions?
First and foremost, Jeffrey, I don't think you can have a plan B. If you're dabbling in this and you haven't risked your day job, mortgaged your house, and maxed out your credit cards, no one really believes that you're seriously starting up a company, particularly in the biomedical space. So my credibility changed dramatically with my team when I resigned my day job to focus exclusively on my startup. And the time we did that, we had $50,000. And ultimately, we recruited a team. And, the point was made about equity. I was very generous when I had a lot of equity and no money. And, my colleagues ended up owning 25% of my company. And, we went public at $38. So, everybody bought into the dream, but they didn't believe it until they knew that I was serious enough about it to stay with it. We knew it was going to take time, and we knew it was going to take more money than we had, but we made believers by being totally committed.
It's very true. And I've said for many years that I would be very hesitant to invest in a company where a physician or a scientist did it part-time. Because they're conflicted, especially if you're a physician. Your major commitment is to take care of your patients, not to build a company. And if that conflict is not resolved, as an investor, you may have some issues. So yes,
Uh,
and just like you, Fletcher, physicians who thought of an idea and have 100% of the company many times don't want to give up that equity. But my usual dissertation to them is 100% of nothing is still nothing. And they have to be able to build a team. And let's talk a little bit about building a team. And what are the,
if I may, if I
yeah,
may,
go ahead,
Jeffrey, real
Ahmed.
quick on the aspect of bringing on clinicians as well. Aside from what Fletcher brought up, it's an education process, and this is part of the customer discovery that the companies and the startups have to do. They have to find the right partners, the right clinicians that are entrepreneurial in spirit, that can sit down and actually listen. Like, I've gone through hundreds of doctors, and I'm really glad to have found the individuals that were like, hey, yeah, I want to be a part of this company. I want to help you guys out. We'll do, things that you need for your FDA clearance. But a lot of people, they talk to one doctor, they get pushed away, and they're like, okay, I can't do this. Doctors are so busy, like you mentioned, with their patients, that sometimes, yeah, they don't know what the rules are with regulations. They're told by a company, oh yeah, you could use this, and in actuality, the company just tricked them into doing an unapproved drug on their patients. And this is now, we're shifting into more doctors are trying to be more aware about regulation. So for a company out there that's trying to do, whether it's a device or a drug, you need to go find out, who the champions are in your space, who are the individuals that are going and giving talks. Because if you're going to a private doctor that doesn't go out, doesn't go to any conferences, doesn't do anything in the medical profession, good luck trying to convince them that your product actually, means anything. You need to find that those early adopter type customers that really can help and push your company forward, and that are willing to discuss and understand, oh, okay, yeah, I see. Yeah, we're going to have to do a human clinical trial. We're going to have to do A, B, and C. How can I help with that? I can offer up my facility, for, like Ray mentioned, for a little bit of equity. And this is what we did for our post-market human clinical studies. Gave a little bit of equity to the doctors after the successful completion of the study, obviously, to avoid any bias. But there are multiple ways to do that with your clinician partners, and those are the individuals, as you keep them intrigued in your product, they might end up investing as well.
It's very true. It's very true. Um, so Doug, when you looking at a company to potentially invest in, and they are giving you their uses and sources of finances, what are the things that stand out to you as that makes perfect sense in terms of your prioritization of how you're going to spend the funds. And what doesn't make sense is like an automatic disqualifier, like, no, you're not going to get funded.
That's a great question. So look, it starts with the founder. Um, these businesses live or die based on that leadership of that CEO, that founder, or their founding team. And so the first thing we look for is a founder is a storyteller that can understand, they're able to communicate in a way that it connects emotionally to people. This tells me something about this person, about how well they have got a vision for what they're doing with their product. But it's a signal. It's not always correct, but it's a signal around what they're likely to be able to achieve. If a great storyteller can be a great recruiter, it's going to be able to get those early adopters and first users of products in. They're going to be able to find product market fit quicker and pivots quicker because they're great communicators in general. But to your question of what are the disqualifiers and use of funds specifically, look, we are looking for a few things. And there's no rule of thumb specifically on what makes a great use of funds and not. We can tell some things that are red flags, though. High compensation for the management team and the individual themselves, especially in a cash compensation versus some type of an incentive. If they're looking for us to fund their business, but they're really not taking any risk on. I liked the comment earlier from Fletcher around burning the ships and having that focus. So we look at that. Those are some of the red flags as well. Are they focused? Have they burned their ships? What are they risking here if this doesn't work? But you have to look at the specific business plan as well. Do you believe that those use of funds are materially getting them down that road? We want to see that product market fit and signal as quickly as we can. And technical people, which generally we're all talking about here, these are engineers and scientists or doctors of some type, and they're very smart, intellectually people. But some of these get lost in the amazement of their technology achievements and how bright they are. They really are missing some of the other things. Do they have a monetization strategy? Do they really understand the economics? Do they understand relative competitive advantages? So you start asking them about the market. Oh, this is its first of its kind. It's never been done before. We're the only ones who can do this. Well, a little bit of work, if you're understanding and some honesty about what that next best alternative, do they have significant relative competitive advantage? Do they understand it? And are they doing things to document that significant relative competitive advantage with those funds? So those are some of the key things I guess I would point out.
That's great. And what do you or other panelists know in terms of identifying a problem that has credibility with healthcare providers, that they would also agree that, yes, this is a problem, and it is something that I would put in my toolkit and I would use for my patients? So what are you expecting of founders to do to convince you of that? Or what have you done yourself to convince investors?
Yes. So, I mean, I'll be short on this to leave room for the other panelists. But look, for me, I look at that. We're going to do our own homework first of all, right? We're going to talk to customers. We're going to talk to competitors. We're going to try and understand what that is. But there's a pretty simple question about why. Why is this needed? And when we try and quantify this around who pays, if you're talking about a new area, brand new, nothing exists, total white space, that's not always the good thing that people portray. I'm not afraid of competition. Sometimes competition in a crowded space, it sounds like a terrible thing, but if you truly have relative competitive advantage, I can understand how to monetize a business like that. And so looking towards those types of things, but I want to leave room for the other panelists specific to the medical devices.
I'll speak to this briefly.
Go ahead, Patrick. Go.
It's all about looking for unmet needs and listening. In the times that we have switched from delivering engineering services to products was from interacting with customers and listening very carefully for the things that they lament, the things that they don't have time for, the things that they wish they had that they don't, and then digging around for what that value is. Sometimes people lament things and are looking for things that don't have a lot of value or aren't on their top 10 list of problems that they're trying to solve. And if you can find a bunch of potential customers that all have the same need that's in their top 10 list, it can't be in their top 50, it has to be in their top 10, or they won't take the time to pay for it. And it delivers a lot of value or saves them a lot of money, and that's quantifiable. You likely have something that can get early traction.
And I would add that finding problems is actually not that difficult. So problems especially in healthcare and med tech space are a dime a dozen. And so what we really, in finding the problem, building a product, that maybe only can take you 25% of the way there. How do you sell it? Who's going to buy it? How much are they going to pay for it? All the channels that are involved. I mean, selling into healthcare, I mean, for us, building a blood pressure monitor that's for patient monitoring in the hospital. I mean, you have value analysis committees, you have, super long sales cycles. There's just so much more to it than just identifying a problem. But I think there are many, many problems. You're not going to be able to solve all of them. And so you do have to really focus in on, okay, what are the specific problems that you're going to sell that specifically your customers are going to pay for, and how do you demonstrate that is a viable market? I think that's one of the more, I mean, for us, where you think about blood pressure monitoring, yes, you can apply it to so many different applications from, ambulatory to sleep to hospital monitoring. And for us, like, we really had to focus in on, okay, we're going to go after the operating room because our technology is a really great fit. It works extremely well, very accurate, and can track, and we can replace an arterial line. But that's when we were first talking to investors, everybody wanted us to do consumer. Everybody wanted us to go out there and put it on everybody. And hey, it works so great. Let's just, bring it out there and let people use it. But it's really being able to identify, hey, for what's the right beachhead for you to go after where you can actually sell this product.
Yeah, and it's important to understand the mechanics of how you sell into an organization that determines what your potential profitability may be.
And that's something that we did, Jeff, with our technology during our customer discovery. We didn't just only interview doctors. We actually interviewed, like Ray mentioned, the value analysis committee. Hey, what is the problem that you guys are seeing, right? Because at the end of the day, it matters on who's paying. It's not really always who's using the technology. I've heard of hospitals, they don't care. They'll have a product that they've already negotiated with, and they'll force the doctors to use it because it's part of the rules of working at the hospital or having a dual appointmentship at the hospital. So combining a bit about who's actually paying for this and interviewing those people and understanding from those people's perspective. For us, we found out as long as we price our technology the same as what they're currently using, they have no problems switching out the other technology, as long as at least bare minimum pricing. Then you sell a little bit on the benefits to the doctors. Hey, this is the cost, time saving, etc. for you as a user. But the hospitals, for most of the hospitals that we've gotten on board, they're like, can you just price it as the other technologies? And we're like, yep. And they're like, okay, cool, we're done.
Right.
I just want to follow up here really quickly, because this is, he mentioned a key point that early stage entrepreneurs often miss. In med tech and healthcare, you often have a sales trifecta. You often have the seller, you have the user, and you have the buyer. And the tricky part is, as Ahmed mentioned, the buyer and the user are not always the same, and they don't always have the same interests. And if you are interviewing only the users for your product, you very often will not have any sales because you're not meeting the needs of the buyer as well.
Mm-hmm.
Our first $2 million into a startup company is to build a prototype. None of this matters if the device doesn't work. So before you hire a VP of sales and get a big office and invest in a clean room and find distribution channels, show me as your lead investor that your device in fact works. And if it works, we weaponize the PR. We'll go to every trade show in that space in the world. and sponsor something to, show them this prototypical device. We don't need to look for customers. If it's that disruptive, all they got to do is see it. And you still got to get through the FDA, but you need a prototype to do that. So when we talk to a young startup, the entire initial effort is to build a prototype.
So we all know that securing funds is probably one of the most difficult things that we do in life science and healthcare startups. Share with us some tips that we can, share with our attendees as to what has worked for you, either as a startup or what works for you as a venture capitalist in terms of being pitched to that puts you on the top of the list, and what has not worked for you. And we'll just go around the room. So Ahmed, go ahead and start.
Yeah, so for me, we started off our company going down the non-dilutive pathway, so leveraging NIH, NSF, DoD funding. We found a really nice fit within NIH, so we started focusing there. And I think that helped us really kind of, as Fletcher mentioned, you want to get that early prototype, you want to get all of that, situated and finalized. And non-dilutive funding is a really great way to go about it. Phase one SBIRs right now with NIH go for upwards of $306,000, up to a year's worth of time that you can basically pay, rent a facility, do whatever you need to do. And then at phase two is $2 million. So again, imagine getting almost $2.4 million total in non-dilutive funding at an early stage company. Now, by no means is the NIH pathway or NSF pathway easy and or guaranteed. But if you keep going at it, it does work out for you. So we've been grateful to be successfully funded multiple times through NIH. Companies like Vina, like Ray's company, they've been successful as well, and a few others that I know about. And it really takes about leveraging that non-dilutive so that when you do go to investors, you're a lot more mature in the sense of technologically. And now it's, hey, we have now a much better plan because NIH provides a lot of free services. You got the technical business assistance program. You got the niche assessment program that can do a lot of these independent searches of what does IP landscape look like? Who are your customers? Who are the people that you should target? And that's all free within that non-dilutive funding. And that's what really helped us to really de-risk the company as much as possible and then start raising the capital that we needed to go about FDA clearance and then post-market human studies.
So knowing these non-dilutive grants usually only have about a 40 to 45% success rate.
It's a lot more difficult now.
Right.
I think it's a lot more competitive.
Would you suggest that the PI writes the grant themselves, or they hire somebody who is more adept at writing these things?
I think so. I've done both. Okay, so in the past we did it ourselves, and then we're like, hey, I don't have that much time to do it myself. Let me hire a grant writer. In all honesty, and I do this as a side thing, I help other companies try to get federal funding. Writing it your own, you're truly the only one that really understands your technology. It doesn't really take that much to learn how to write. NIH has a lot of free grants. You can literally download a grant right now. There's some things that are like blacked out for IP purposes, but you can download those grants from NIH's website, look at how it's written, and just emulate the same exact thing for yourself. If you have the capital, by all means, hire a grant writer, but in no way is that guaranteed. I see hiring a grant writer in the early stages is more of a black box than it is a guarantee. You can hire a grant writer when you're working on like a phase 2 SBIR. You need a commercialization plan. Maybe you're not an expert in that. Yeah, those things, sure. But at Cinter, myself, my business partner Hugo, we've been writing our own grants, and we take multiple shots at goal versus just submitting one per cycle. We average about now 4 to 5 applications per cycle. And I think that's where you then get the potential of getting scored in the 40-50% range. But if you're just doing one application per cycle, trust me, it's going to take a long time, unless you have a really, like Fletcher mentioned, breakthrough technology that all the reviewers agree with. It's going to take a long time to get funded that way.
Right.
Yeah, I agree that Ahmed, and I think some of the stats on the different agencies and the NIH, I think the ones that we go after, and NHLBI, the Heart, Blood, Lung organization, I think that it's like a 15% acceptance rate. So you really do, as Ahmed saying, is you do have to do it multiple times. As you apply for more grants, you get better at it. So you get feedback every time. You get the comments from reviewers. And you also have to understand there's a bit of luck to it because it depends on who's on the other side on the review panel. So it's important to understand that process really well, understand how they score things. And there is a grantsmanship aspect to it that either can be learned internally or can be developed, can be brought in through external consultants. But I think being able to do more of it definitely helps your percentages and gives you a better shot of being able to win those awards.
Yeah. Anyone else?
I'll speak to maybe what can help you more on from an investor side. You have to
Yeah.
think if you're that founder looking for an investor, not that non-dilutive funding, don't get lost in this impact you're going to have. I'm changing the world. I'm saving lives. I'm doing all of these things, and that's what's going to get your investor. You have to understand from the investor's perspective, they're accountable too, right? We raise money from LPs. We're trying to deliver a result to an LP. My ability to get capital to invest in those startups is very much a function of how I execute and the results that we deliver. So when we look at these things, it's a risk decision. And so what can you do to convince your potential investor that you are a lower risk, higher return? That risk return relationship is what we're after here. And so first of all, are you even chasing the right kind of capital? Are you too far out from being commercial and generating revenue that you're chasing the wrong kind of capital? Are the paces that you can move through your next stage gates for when you're going to need your next capital? Do you understand the metrics that your capital source is being held accountable to? Maybe you should be after.
That's a great point. And if you can give the audience a little bit of a structure as to what's the right kind of capital when.
Yeah. So look, when you're taking venture money, a true venture capital fund, groups like us will speak to us, but I don't think we're unique. We're willing to look at these multi-stages of investment. We might join you from a seed or a pre-seed and be around for 2 or 3 stages of investments. But you have to do some mental math on your side that says, hey, look, when I run out of capital, I've got this 18-month or 24-month runway. What's the next moment that I'm going to need capital? And I'm going to have to work backwards from when I'm going to start raising that. You have to understand that groups like these venture guys, we need roughly a 3 times lift between those cycles. And if you can't get that, you're probably talking to the wrong kind of money. It's not that you couldn't get that later. It's just, are you hitting the milestones that will allow you to get a 3 times multiple, at least a markup on paper? These aren't real money. The real money is going into your business, but does the valuation metrics match up to what else is going on in the market? If not, things like that non-dilutive capital is better. Friends and family money is better for you. There's other ways to try and tackle this. Strategic investors who have a vested interest in this, channels to market that you can look at, licensees who might want to take this on. These are all people that have different metrics and reasons for why they're making that investment. And they're maybe not having that same accountability. But for a venture investor, that is truly what we're looking for. And so there are other things in risk, though, that you can do to mitigate this. What is your team? Talking about, do you have the right team around you? Are you a solo entrepreneur? Because this is a risk factor for us. We look for signals. What other signals can you show me that this is a lower risk? You have received non-dilutive funding. Your friends and family have invested. I love coming in around that because, man, if this fails, you're kind of screwed. You're making a lot of enemies of people that you got to go have Christmas with. I like that motivation. Again, I'm repeating what Fletcher's already said, but are you focused on this? Do you understand? What's your unfair advantage? Are you such a world-class expert in this? or are you a serial founder, have done this before, that I can take a bet saying, you know what, this does look risky, but this looks like the kind of risk that we want to take. And if you can do some of those things, that's where you'll get your money. But you got to tell that story, and you got to think of it from not from the view of this impact or a market. Think about it like an investor. You got to put that investor hat on.
Yeah.
We see business plans all the time that have a $38 billion market. And we know that you're not going to go from a $50,000 company to address that market. So be realistic with your prospects about your investable market. Can you get to revenue in 2 years, 3 years? We're happy to invest in a company that has a $12 million revenue forecast because we know that's scalable. We know that's a demonstration of concept. We know that could create an exit. So we don't need you to show us $100 million of revenue, in 5 years. That's 3% of an addressable market. So you've got to come to an investor, particularly those of us that have been operators, and be realistic about what you're capable of doing and what your addressable market is. The most important person we believe on that team, other than the founder inventor, is the CFO. You've got to have a seasoned, smart, been there, done that partner. And when you approach venture capital, they have to believe as much in that person and their ability to rein you in as a founder so that their money is going to stretch as far as it can. I advise small companies all the time, don't go raising money if you don't have a CFO partner.
And what do you think about fractional CFOs?
I think they're fractional CFOs. They're sitting at home, watching soap operas and, paying attention to you when they can. It doesn't work for me as an investor. I want to know that the guy's a member of the team and some seasoned experience is really helpful and they know how to manage money.
I just want to preface real quick what Fletcher mentioned about the 12 million by the projection of a startup company. That's what they're looking for. So I think it's very critical that the startup founders understand different investors are looking for different things. You go to Silicon Valley, they're going to expect you to show how are you going to make $100 million in 5 years, if not more, right? And how do you know, how can you support that with the people that you need to hire, the amount of sales team, et cetera. With Fletcher's organization, as he mentioned, be honest, show us 12 million because we know that we could scale that. But you have to really understand, aside from all the things that we just said right now, building your team, figuring out, who your customers are. Even when you approach an investor, they are a customer. You have to understand them as well. You can't just randomly waltz right into their door. You have to do your own background research as well into the VCs that are investing in your space. What are their thesis? How much are they looking as a return? There are certain funds that will look for, I want all my money back. So if I've raised a $500 million fund, you better be a $500 million win for me so that I can make back that whole entire fund. Other VCs are like, hey, no, we invest $1 million. We expect $5 million at the end of the day. We want a 5x return or up to a 20x return. You have to really understand. And I think one thing that if I could tell to founders that's been successful is don't pitch to VCs yet. Try to become friends with them. Understand, find a partner that you can go to, ask them questions, or even go to events that these VCs are a part of and say, hey, chat up with them. What do you guys do? What's your focus? Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, no. Don't play the startup mode at that point. Really try to understand your customers so that way later on you can say, hey, blah, blah, blah. I met you at this event. Appreciate your insights. This is what I'm working on. I was wondering if you're interested in it. And that's where you take your shot.
Yeah, learning what the funder's due diligence process is a key ingredient to successful fundraising. If you don't get it, then you'll never understand what are they looking for. So we all know the term the valley of death. It has some different definitions. So I'm going to ask you, after a company has done that initial friends and family and pre-seed round, and let's say they may or may not have venture capital institutional money, but they're not hitting those milestones that gives them that 3x bump in valuation. and they're kind of stuck. So, how do you define the valley of death, and what have you found to be successful strategies to overcome it? And what have you found to be ways that you can really sink the ship really fast?
Well, running out of money will sink pretty much any ship, you know. So if you end up unable to make a payroll, you know, you've lost everything. So, you know, you have to anticipate the burn rate and how long it's going to last you, and don't find yourself up against a cliff with the inability seriously to pay your bills. So, and sometimes 100 grand could make the difference. Anticipate that, get out in front of it, you know, do something creative like a convertible note or a safe, or go to your friends and family. You know, you want to make sure you can get to the finish line. Otherwise, it's not the valley of death, it's pure death. And you will have let down your team, and you just have to anticipate that. And I think reduce your valuation expectations. People come to us all the time with a seed company, start a company, and a $20 million valuation. And they said, well, you know, my cousin works in Silicon Valley. And I said, okay, then maybe you should go see your cousin, because we would value your business in its current state at $4 million. Now, if you want to make a deal with us at that valuation, we'd be happy to be an investor. You know, so it's the ability to target money and then manage it so that you don't run out of it.
Yeah.
Hey, Jeff, there are a couple of Q&As if you want to check them out. If you can click on that.
Well, while you're doing that, Jeff, maybe I'll speak to another view on Valley of Death then while you're looking at some of those questions. I think Valley of Death, at least in my world, is often referred to more from that context of your product, and that your product isn't being commercialized at the pace you would have thought, or you're not getting that adoption, or there's something around that. This principle of focus doesn't just apply to you individually, it applies to how you operate your business. And you know, too many times we see these, especially first-time founders, trying to boil the ocean. You know, they're excited about all the things that they could do, and all of the applications that their product could be applied to, and you know, that's great, but get somewhere now. You know, it doesn't have to be the perfect end application. It doesn't have to be the most profitable one. You've got to show that your product has that product market fit. You almost assuredly are going to have to pivot. And so if you can get to that pivot point sooner and get data back from the market, and so that you're pivoting in an informed way, you can accelerate the way that you cross that valley of death and accelerate it. We've talked a lot about bringing in intelligent advisors around you, but you need champions too, right? And so sometimes how you get through this is finding where do you have a champion, and where you can find that evangelist that's going to help you communicate what you're trying to do in ways that you couldn't do yourself, because you're always seen as conflicted. You're always seen as, of course, your baby's beautiful. But these evangelists, these champions, can really help you cross that. But it's about trust. Are they seeing that you risking it all? Are you putting everything? Is your ego in a spot where you will accept that type of a champion, and will you give the glory to them? Worry about being successful in your business and not getting the credit. Who cares about the credit? Make your business fucking fly. So anyways, just some other thoughts there on product.
No, those are great pearls that most people don't really understand or take to heart.
There's a
Also
question in chat regarding teams, and if we could go back to that, particularly in the medical device space where you have a physician or an inventor, sometimes it's really challenging to commit that person. They are not the CEO of this startup company. And they have no credibility as a CEO if they've never been a CEO. So when you're looking at a team, for us, it's typically 3 people: a seasoned CEO, someone that's done this before, built a company, moreover, exited a company; a CTO, that is often the inventor or the physician they've taken the number 2 job, not the CEO job, and a CFO. And we looked at those 3 people to deliver our investment.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about building teams, and not only teams that are the operators of the company, but your governance team, your board. What has been the ways that you have seen people build boards that have been successful versus people that have built boards that have been totally disastrous?
I want to speak to
I'll-
this just really quickly. And one of the biggest red flags, and this is often a problem with early stage companies or bootstrap companies where they don't have external investors that demand board seats. That is when your board is primarily made up of people that are inside of the company. It very quickly becomes an echo chamber. And I see a lot of companies that are doing very well. They might have $20-30 million in revenue and $5-10 million in profit, but their entire board is internal to the company, and they don't grow and they don't learn, and they get trapped by a glass ceiling of often their own ignorance on things. So although that may not apply to venture-backed companies, it is something to be very careful of, is having a board that is lopsided towards people that are too close to the day-to-day of the company.
Right.
And I would add as well, like everybody here, if not most of people here, are early stage founders, and I think what can easily happen is, you have these individuals that come to you and you're like, wow, you know everything about what I'm doing, and then you just like, yeah, join my board, and then you sign documents where there is no yearly voting. They have basically a perpetual in perpetuity a board seat, and this is the issues that lay the foundation for problems down the line, where you have to have now those tough decisions of like, hey, you're not adding any value whatsoever to this company. And same goes with giving out equity to every advisor left and right that comes to you and says, oh yeah, for my time I need to have 15% of the company or whatever. You have to be very careful. You have to really analyze and understand who is it that you're unfortunately getting in bed with. It's a marriage, so to say, between these individuals, and you have to be very safe, and you have to protect your company, because if this truly does become a success, you might not find the issues right now, but the VC or the next investor that does look into your company and looks in through your due diligence documentation, your board seats, etc., they're going to be like, hey, this is a huge red flag for us. Fix it. And then they're going to leave you to fix it, and then you're going to have to go have those difficult conversations. So from the get-go, from an early stage startup, you don't really have to start a board of directors. Maybe it's just a group of the founders agreeing and disagreeing on certain things. But over time, yes, you're going to have to get a board of directors. And I see it more happening, I would say, after your first, whether fundraising, significant fundraising and prototyping completion. Okay, then you bring in a seasoned entrepreneur in your space. And that's what we did. And, you have yearly votes. Therefore, you could switch them out without having those difficult conversations like, hey, thank you so much for your time. We're going to switch you out for this individual. And then you get a VC that wants a board seat. You bring on that VC. But even on the VC perspective, make sure you're partnering with the right VCs, that they're bringing actual value for that board seat itself, and will not just stump you at every single path that you're trying to go as your company.
It is a critical part of company building and company success that founders many times don't either understand or appreciate. So thank you for enlightening us. I have a quick question here. Do you know of any funding options designed for early stage medical device or drug startups, particularly founders without a technical background? Anyone?
There's a lot of new grants coming out. NIH has a early career entrepreneurship grant that you could take a look into, that is supposed to help get you to be mentored by somebody. So funding goes to you, funding goes to the mentor to help you walk you through. And I think that's a good resource for non-technical founders. But ultimately, at the end of the day, to be in the med device drug startup, if you're not the technical founder, then maybe it's not the position of you to be the CEO or the CTO, but potentially the biz dev or somebody else. So I would take a step back. Like Doug said, it's all about success and not credit. If you have the idea, but you build a team that can execute that idea, take a step back, be the VP of business development, go partner. You don't always have to be the CEO.
Yeah, that's
The
it.
other,
That's
the other
that's
thing,
hard.
Jeff, Jeff, the other thing I would add there on these funding sources for these early stage, and a place that maybe also addresses the issue around where do I find my team. There are intermediate steps between this non-dilutive funding and this friends and family funding and venture. And often we refer to these as accelerators or incubators. And there are domain-specific accelerators and incubators that you can look into. Often these will give you that mentorship. They'll help you recruit co-founders. They'll help you build your story and plan. They can often help you bring early adopter customers, especially if you go to something that's very specific to around the category that you're looking at. They're not all good, so be careful. These generally are asking, they're usually giving a very small amount of money just to get you going, and they're asking for some equity in your business. Typically, that's kind of on the 5% range, but there are many success stories that do come out of these. And so while I would say that there is no one perfect path for any startup, you need to weigh all of these options and which ones are right for you. If you have a particularly complex startup and a long path and you've got these complex issues, I would lean more heavily into weighing something like an accelerator, an incubator, especially if they're made up of, look at who the partners are, look who the entrepreneurs in residence are of these entities. And if they built something similar to or adjacent to what you're trying to do, it may be well worth it, and it could accelerate your network in helping you open up those doors.
Yeah, and one of the questions
You
we
also
had
need
was,
to hunt around your local ecosystem as well. For instance, in Arizona, there are at least 2 or 3 sources of $50,000, $20,000, $150,000 that is designed specifically for early stage medical device, med tech startups. Now, not having a technical background, if you don't have at least a well-rounded business plan, that's going to be a barrier to even getting those kinds of grants because they are all application based.
And I think there's
Jeff,
no one path.
I'm sorry, Jeff, we only have like less than 5 minutes left. We should start wrapping up. And we
okay.
have a bunch of questions as well.
So there was one question about longer term ventures, the kind of business that I'm in biotechnology that takes, 10 years to come to fruition and hundreds of millions of dollars to get assets to market. You need to have a good plan for when to go to the market and when you have reached certain milestones so that your valuation again goes up and your investors are interested in continuing the ride. Because if it works at the end, everybody has a nice return. But it is a constant struggle and something that you have to really be strategic about and plan out very diligently at the very beginning and throughout the journey. So as we're wrapping up, let me ask you, give our audience some either pearls or red flags in terms of the whole startup of a life science company and what you've seen that they should either absolutely do or never do in less than 30 seconds. Doug, you're first.
It got me there. Okay. Start with your exit in mind. I guess that would be one of my comments is you gotta understand where you're going so that you're gonna understand what your roadmap is. If you know that, then, and if you don't know that, any road will do. So start with an exit in mind and build off of that.
Patrick.
I would say this is true for partners and employees. Hire slow, fire fast. Don't make compromises on getting the right people. Don't pick people up because you're desperate to execute on something. You will pay for it later.
Ray.
Yeah, I'd say there's no one size fits all in terms of like the path to take. And even some of the advice that you've heard from this group here, it's advice. They're not rules. Even if for Fletcher, for example, for his fund, you need to have a CFO. That's not every single fund out there. And you have to understand, who's on the other side that you're dealing with. But the one piece of advice I would say is really have your milestones well planned out because especially if you're on a long-term trajectory, if it's a 10-year roadmap, you're not doing a milestone of like 3 that when you hit that valley of death in the middle that, hey, you can show, hey, I said, even though I didn't get FDA clearance, but I've got 100 patients from my clinical studies. So you need to have short-term milestones and be able to demonstrate success through those milestones.
Agreed. Ahmed.
Mine is just know your customer. Know your customer with your actual product. Know your customer from the investor side. Know your customer from the payer side. At the end of the day, you should be constantly in the customer discovery mode, understanding what it's going to take to actually bring your product to market. There was that mention about long time. Well, some investors you have to go to and say, hey, what time do you invest? And they will say, oh, I only invest after phase 1 data. How do you get to that? And that goes into Douglas' point, think about the exit and work backwards. You have to constantly understand and really break down your company as the problem first. Solve your company as a problem, then create the technology and go out there.
Fletcher.
If you're not aligned with a university, if you're not inside a university research system, go find someone to partner with. Their access to capital is going to be 10x what yours is by yourself. A lot of them are looking for research partners.
And I'll end by saying that most companies have 4 essential assets: technology, money, people, and time. Without the technology, you're not even getting to the starting line. So you have to have the technology. When you have the technology, then you have to look after how are you going to get the money. And that takes a lot of time and a lot of effort because without the money, you can't get the people. But you need the people in order to make your product. And all of that takes an inordinate amount of time. And I will tell you that as I get older, I find that the one thing that is not fungible is time. So use your time wisely in pursuing your technology, your time, and your people, and the money will come. And hopefully, we wish you very successful ventures in healthcare and life sciences. Panel, thank you. You were terrific. I appreciate your joining me today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
I would like to add one more thing. I think Doug and Fletcher kind of alluded to that, and that is sometimes if you give up all that equity, investors are not interested in investing in you because you don't have enough to keep you going. So you better plan it ahead of time and have enough equity when you're trying to raise money as well. All right. Well, thank you so much, Doug, Fletcher, Patrick, Ahmed, and Ray. And thank you, Jeffrey, for moderating. For the participants, there is the next one is in about 5 minutes. So don't go away. Join the next link on the platform. Thank you all for being part of this. And of course, the investors like Doug and Fletcher, also Patrick, please stay on the platform, connect with some of the founders. It would be great to have you as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye.